Okay, no more videos, sorry. Thanks for all the amazing talks. Davida, do you want to join us as well? We have 15 minutes to answer some questions, get some questions from you guys. I think it's a little bit, let's call it adventurous to talk about cities in a computing conference, but I think there's a bunch of overriding themes that connect this. First of all, this kind of talk about algorithm of the way that we function around in our worlds. Neuroscience is based a lot on algorithms, but algorithms also of data, of the AI that we create that's going to make the decisions akin to the way we make decisions. So this connection of algorithms and data is, I think, really important for understanding how we extend our humanness into technology in order to create environments that are good for us. We have some questions from the app, but you can keep on sending, and also you can just raise your hands. Good old-fashioned way is good too. The question, I'll answer this question first because it's easy. Where do the short videos come from? They come from YouTube. We chose them very, very well. And how many people invest in the smart city platform? Where does the funding come from? Does anyone know where smart cities emerged out of? Anyone? No? So IBM and Cisco felt that smart cities were probably a good bet for business, and indeed they are, because there's Internet of Things, there's algorithms, there's businesses that need the data, and of course the whole industry is set up. Both IBM and Cisco and everyone else in technology benefited from it. I think from my perspective, and I want to hear from some of the speakers, conscious cities in a way is a critique of smart cities. It's saying instead of letting technology take us where it wants to, and the market therefore taking us where it wants to, we need to tell the market and technology where we want to go. And for that, we need to understand our needs. We need to use neuroscience, we need to create empathy both in the way we design, but also in the way we code. And I think that's why we're here for data scientists like you and people who are interested in coding, because a lot of that responsibility is starting to transfer to you and to your profession. So I think if anyone wants to give some kind of comment on what is the difference, and maybe we'll start with Anat because you're kind of the closest to smart cities. How do you, in Zen City and your work, humanize how smart cities have developed up until now? Do you want to? I think we have a...
Can you ask again?
Yeah, it works.
Can you ask again?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so in terms of someone as working in smart cities, how do you make sure that technology isn't the driving force to what you're doing, but rather that human needs are the driving force?
So the way we think about it is that we, especially in the US, it's really clear that the city really wants to work for the citizens, and we know that if there is a requirement that violates privacy, we will never do that. But mainly we get requirements that really help the people. For example, all the stuff that I showed, but now we are working on a project to discover where there is food poisoning in cities, so in order to come and inspect the restaurants. So this is an example of a requirement that came from a city, and it's really, really clear that it's helping the citizens. It's not even a question. So we just look at the things that the city want, and we will never do something that harm the people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anyone want to ask a question for the speakers? Don't be shy. Yep. Maybe.
Just, I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so we often see sentiment analysis as solution for a more bottom-up approach, but reality suggests that it can also be harmful, because sentiment analysis is very widely used, for example, in campaigning. So how is like, what's the good way to harness sentiment analysis so that it doesn't become a propaganda, way of just propaganda. So because in the same way that I am a politician and I receive this data, I can decide to increase the perception or rather alter the perception of people, for example, regarding security. For example, I'm thinking of Twitter, where the architecture is very popular, people that are being followed, so it's like that people really is not distributed. So one politician says that we're on a security emergency, and immediately this follows down. And the sentiment will catch on even though actual data does not support it.
I think it's a really good point, and especially for our generation, where most of the elections we've seen as adults have been ones that are manipulated by data. I think that's the ethical role of data scientists here is a good question, because we know both American politics, but also Brexit. There's a lot of intervening. Yeah, in Italy as well. So everywhere. I think this is kind of a question for Anat.
One post or one tweet even with a lot of comments will not influence the data as much as like a huge amount of people talking about something. So at least for us, it's an aggregation, and like if some politician does a real trick and creates reality, then yes, we cannot change it. But as I said, one thread will not change our data really tremendously. So at least that we can handle.
I think there's you make an interesting point that rides both on data and architecture. And we actually had slightly this discussion earlier, that they're both very political things. You can't create architecture devoid of politics, and you can't talk about data devoid of politics, because we all know that you can create any statistic you want from whatever data and back up the argument that you desire, right? And so I think this is kind of the role of conscious cities in this critique of smart cities, to say, let's talk about ethics before we talk about how this data is used for our own political means. I'm going to ask you guys a question, because I'm kind of curious. What is it that draws you to talking about cities and architecture as data scientists? Because it's not too often that data scientists come to these kind of sessions, let's say. Does anyone want to confess? No? You don't want to confess? You're going to confess.
The point is, everybody lives in the city, so I think it's a topic that anybody can relate to. And that's one reason. The other reason is that my boyfriend is from political studies, and he's in the policy making of public transportation, and so I was curious about the discourse. Mm-hmm. And so because I am in the conference and he's not, so I can hear part on his behalf.
Okay.
Because I think Rome is a city that needs a lot of new ideas for becoming a nice place to live again.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Michal a question, because I feel like it. Michal, because you kind of reached out to the students here, I think it's interesting to hear from you if you think that computer science and data science is receptive to this kind of work.
It's a tough question, but so in our lab we are a mixed team. We're computer scientists, psychologists, and architects, and there's a term that I really like to use. It's called the Symmetry of Ignorance. It's a stage where people from different disciplines have to sit down at a table and interact, and they even can't use the same, they can't agree on the same words, right? So it takes time until a common language is developed. But once it does, you realize that the differences are not as great as you initially imagined. And then, so I work with computer scientists. I rely on computer scientists. I have 2 research assistants. All of my collaborators on all my papers are computer scientists because they provide the computational cognition end, and we bring the problem. So it's a very much a prolific ground for research, but it needs, in order to thrive, you need to first overcome this symmetry of ignorance. That's my point. So yes, it's a very much a receptive audience once you overcome that obstacle.
Thank you. Another question for you as well about the use of technology in the architecture that you spoke about, where data came in and where, for example, the architecture became responsive to people. In your opinion, what's the best use of this kind of technology?
Could you clarify more? It's not clear, your question.
I'm just trying to
because
read from
yeah.
what I have. So basically, when technology is embedded into architecture,
Yeah.
it's supposed to be enhancing architecture in one way or another. How do you make sure that that technology is used to enhance the space for people?
Okay, at the first I must tell you, the technology that I applied and now I spoke about it, it was just to improve the social interaction between the people. For this, I just use some specific data from brainwave, that how I can synchronize the people, some specific data. And then I tried to have a vision to the future that we must have our privacy also in the same time, Because when I try to use this data, I see a lot of people that I'm analyzing them with neuroscience. They're afraid of their data in future, like the hackers. Then we start to just use a specific data and translate them on something that I need. Means I, with processing, with the scripting, just we use it in a specific way that we can use it to have the safety and to have the more better social interaction and synchronization between the people in the space. I don't know if I was clear or not enough.
Yeah. Okay, we're running out of time, but if anyone has one more question from the audience? No? So we'll wrap up. So thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thank you to ACM and to you guys.